Margot Wallström, welcome to Lund and the Raoul Wallenberg Institute. First of all, can you describe your work for the United Nations?
Since 2 years back, I'm the first one to hold a new mandate created by the Security Council and the Secretary General on conflict-related sexual violence.
And how come this is such a new topic? It should have been there a long time ago, I guess.
Because it is nowadays defined as a peace and security issue, which belongs on top of the Security Council's agenda. It's a heavy impediment to restoring peace and security anywhere.
But I guess it should have been there a long time ago. I mean,
it was there, in a way it was there already 11 years ago when Resolution 1325 was adopted. And that was the first resolution that acknowledged that women and men are affected by war and peace in different ways, but that women do not have a voice in restoring or maintaining, creating peace, and that it was very important to do something about that, and also mentioned rape as a weapon or tactic of war. And in consecutive resolutions this has been better described, and including the creation of this mandate a couple of years ago.
And if you would describe how big a problem among all problems that occur during war is this with the sexual violence?
We know it from history. We know it from every war or conflict from Genghis Khan. It was described in the Bible to our times. But it has also been denoted as history's greatest silence, because also in the Nuremberg trials the judge did not want to see any crying woman in the courtroom. So this has also been not openly recognized as a war crime. It is now, after what happened in the Balkans. We know it from our days, from what happened after the Arab Spring or during the Arab Spring. We know it now from Mali, from Guinea, from all the situations that are now on the Security Council's agenda actually has an element of rape. And that is because the changing nature of war and conflict, leaving civilians as the majority of the victims, and leaving women and children also on the front lines of war.
Would you say, I guess it's hard to know, but is this a growing problem?
We don't know, because we do not have a benchmark, we do not have a possibility to follow it. I think it is maybe it has become the weapon of choice, because most wars today are not wars between two armies on a battlefield. It is more intra-state. It's civilian wars, and civilians are the victims. And I think this affects how you can use this as a very effective and silent and cheap tactic or weapon of war.
And what can you do?
We have lifted it up on, and we hope we can keep it on top of the Security Council's agenda. That is an open recognition of this as, and defining it as a peace and security issue, not solely a women's issue. We can engage peacekeepers and train and prepare peacekeepers so that they can be much better in preventing this. We can first and foremost, I would say, do everything to end impunity, because this has had almost no consequences. And instead it has led to almost total impunity and amnesty for this type of crimes.
You said this is not only a women's issue, but still, would you say women are more involved in these issues than men?
So far, yes. I would say they have been maybe more on the advocacy side, more women, because they are disproportionately affected by it. Most victims or survivors are still women and young girls and children. But we have more and more reports about men and boys also being victims of sexual torture, sexual violence, rapes in detention centers, in prisons, in border crossings, everywhere. And I think this is important to mention, that both men and women also can be among the survivors.
And this seems to be a huge problem. Are you optimistic? Do you think you can really make a difference?
We can make a difference. We have already made a difference in how, for example, the ICC, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, addresses this, that this is part of the indictments, and we can see it, I hope, the day after tomorrow when Charles Taylor, we will see the judgment against Charles Taylor, where this is one element. We see it in how the sanctions committees of the Security Council actually addresses this problem, and we can see it that we are now given all the instruments that the Security Council has available to them, and that is very, very important.
And all this also is a question of wars. Are you, if you will look into the future, are you optimistic or pessimistic when it comes to the world being more or less violent? I know it's a tough question.
Yeah, and it's easy to answer maybe with some kind of banality or.
But are you optimistic?
I'm a true believer in breaking sort of the passivity of ordinary people. I do think that things like what we saw happening in Oslo actually will mean that people wake up and also see that they have a responsibility. At the moment I find it difficult to say that I'm very optimistic, but how can you build on anything else than the fact that women and men everywhere have a fantastic capacity to create?
But why do you say that you're really not very optimistic?
Because I've seen the extremes. I've seen how much evil, as if evil has to be recreated every time. I've seen women and children in particular being subject to so much of cruelty and violence and sexual violence and oppression and I don't know what discrimination, that I really also have a huge frustration and a huge anger over the situation as it is. But I've also been so encouraged and inspired by what women do. They pick their lives up. They have to go on. They just continue fetching water, going to the market, caring for their families. They have to go on. They cannot just lie down and give up. So that is also the most inspiring thing you can experience, and we've seen a lot of that as well.
You've only worked with this for 2 years, but if you would point on one thing that you're specifically happy with, what would that be?
Sounds cruel, but we put people to jail for this kind of crime.
And how important is that, do you think?
Very important, because there were no consequences for raping a woman. And we put Mayele in prison. We've been to the Security Council, and we have now access to everything from visa and travel bans to freezing the assets to making sure that there are sanctions against those that commit these terrible crimes.
Now this may sound as a leading question, but we are at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute. Would you say you get any inspiration from Raoul Wallenberg in your work?
Yeah, because what I hinted at before was really the need for personal courage. In Swedish we say civil courage, and I think it's a great expression. Somebody that actually that people are ready to stick their necks out, to say, yeah, I do take a risk.
But we see this very seldom, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We do. So we need people to be inspired by that you can make a difference, that you can actually create something. He did that. He invented stuff to be able to save the Jews. And I think we see too few of these people. And we need them as a kind of beacons of a time that is sometimes very, very hard to live in.
Some say it's interesting to ask you, because you're Swedish, that he's more famous abroad than in Sweden. You travel a lot. Would you say that's the case?
Oh, absolutely. And I've traveled myself to places like Hungary, and people come up to me and say, oh, you're Swedish, you have to look at our monument. And I didn't know until late that what I actually saw from my window, the office window in New York, was a monument for Raoul Wallenberg. But in Sweden it is not like that. We do not celebrate him in the way
Why is
they
that?
do. Well, it was controversial in those days, and I mean, I'm only learning also that kind of history. It was not a given thing that he would be considered, and I think it had to do with a kind of political climate that existed in those days.
Because
But
at the same time, it could be a very good PR for Sweden that the Swede was so heroic.
it is. I mean, it is. It is not tainted in any way abroad, and I think that's how we should, of course, use and honor his memory. But that kind of personal stamina and courage and spine is very important. And of course, it's a fascinating human destiny, because we do not know exactly what happened to him in the end.
Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you.